Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the World Leaders Forum at Columbia University. I wanted to start by just recognizing the co-sponsors of this event, Columbia's Center on the Global Economy and Governments and the Harriman Institute. And I also want to acknowledge our moderator, Alexander Cooley, former director of the Harriman Institute and vice provost for academic centers and libraries at Barnard College, and he'll be joining us on the stage momentarily. Most importantly, I want to welcome our honored guest, President Klaus Iohannis of Romania and his delegation who are with us here today. We are so delighted to have you here. Before I start, by introducing the President, I wanted to say a few words about Columbia's proud ties to Romania. They include the Nicolae Iorga Visiting Professorship of Romanian Language, created with the support of the Romanian government and named after the famous politician and scholar. And let me turn now to introducing President Iohannis. He got his start as a teacher of physics before moving into the world of politics in the wake of the Romanian Revolution in 1989. He went on to serve as mayor of his hometown, Sibiu, for 4 terms and was elected first vice president and then president of the National Liberal Party. In November 2014, he was elected president of Romania. He then ran for re-election successfully and won again in 2019. The president has focused his attention locally on education, infrastructure, and economic growth. And he's prioritized rooting out corruption, ensuring respect for the rule of law, protecting the independence of the judiciary, and strengthening trust in state institutions. Beyond Romania, he's looked to elevate the country's role as a member of the European Union and NATO, with an eye particularly toward the ongoing war in Ukraine. The President is here today to speak about the Romanian perspective on the war against Ukraine and its impact on Black Sea security. As a nation that shares a long and significant border with Ukraine, Romania has played a prominent role in the conflict and the efforts to get the nation the international aid that it needs. I'm sure you're all eager to hear from him, so without any further delay, please join me in welcoming him to the podium, the President of Romania.
Thank you so much, Madam President of the Columbia University, for such a nice introduction for me. Distinguished professors, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be here today. Romania is the European Union and NATO member state with the longest border with Ukraine and the riparian country to the Black Sea, where the war is happening. This is why I believe that our perspective on the impact of the war in our strategic neighborhood and globally is quite relevant. By launching its invasion of Ukraine, Russia has directly and violently contested the global order created after the end of the Cold War. A fundamental pillar of this legal order is the right and at the same time freedom of each sovereign state to decide on its policies, foreign or domestic, in conformity with the values of democracy, rule of law, and human rights. By invading Ukraine, Russia is trying to bring back revisionism in international relations and spheres of influence in global and regional politics. It is using obsolete concepts such as the so-called right of great powers to impose foreign policy directives on what they define as smaller states. And it is attacking the democratic values, the rule of law, and the rules-based international order. Far too many people sacrificed their lives in the 20th century fighting the promoters of such concepts. It is thus our collective responsibility to oppose these actions. Russia's aggression did not start on the 24th of February 2022. It started way back in 2008 with Russia's attack on Georgia. It continued in 2014 when the so-called Little Green Man, you remember, illegally occupied Crimea. It then continued in Donbass. Romania, being very close to all these conflicts, kept signaling that there was a very brutal and dangerous build-up, and sadly, we have been right. Back then, Russia claimed that the international community, especially what they call the collective West, did not want to pursue dialogue and find solutions to the problems created by Russia itself in Ukraine. This was, of course, not true. The international community, including Ukraine, did engage with Russia. There were hundreds of hours of negotiation within the so-called Minsk agreements framework. But it was Russia who grossly violated the agreements. Before the 2022 invasion, both NATO and the United States made their proposals for talks with Russia, but Russia dismissed them. Hence, Russia showed that when it says it wants to negotiate, it wants to buy itself time to prepare for the next aggression. This is why, when we discuss how the current war in Ukraine could end, there should be no return to a new Minsk agreement type of framework. We must avoid creating another frozen or protracted conflict in the Black Sea region. Only Russia will benefit from such an arrangement. Romania has been arguing for a long time in favor of preventing and solving the so-called protracted or frozen conflicts in this area. As I mentioned many times, the war against Ukraine taught us that in such context, the absence of war does not mean peace. Ironically, as a direct consequence of Russia's irresponsible and illegal actions, we have achieved incredible results globally. Because we were forced to take bold action faster and in a more determined way, Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova were granted EU candidacy status and are preparing for accession negotiations. We drastically reduced the energy dependence on Russia. Finland became a NATO ally, and I'm confident that Sweden will accede soon. Ukraine itself is now closer politically and practically to the alliance. NATO took historic decisions to reinforce defense and deterrence on the eastern flank and at the Black Sea. The Black Sea was irrevocably deemed as a region of strategic importance for the Euro-Atlantic security because everybody understood that what happens in the Black Sea would not stay in the Black Sea. How could all this happen? Russia expected a weak international community and a compliant Ukraine. But by threatening with the use of force and then using force, it achieved exact the opposite. Russia miscalculated and underestimated our response as a community of values and security, and it miscalculated the response of Ukraine. Romania, as a strategic partner of the United States and as a NATO ally, is now safer than it has ever been throughout our recent history. We have a more coherent and multi-domain approach to the defense of the eastern flank. We took concrete measures to intensify cooperation with other allies at the Black Sea, especially the United States. We also look forward to the implementation of the recent US strategy for the Black Sea region, to which Romania brought its substantive contribution. There is also a need to underline the impact this war has on the Republic of Moldova, the second most affected country after Ukraine. Our security, the security of Ukraine and of the Republic of Moldova, are strongly interlinked. If we strengthen their security, then our security will increase and our community will become stronger. So far, the authorities in Chișinău proved impressive resilience faced with Russia's hybrid tactics and other serious challenges. Romania constantly stood by the Republic of Moldova at these difficult times, as well as numerous international partners, including the United States. And we will continue to do so to the best of our capacities. A stable and secure Republic of Moldova is of critical importance for our community of values. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing is clear. For the security of all of us, Ukraine must win. But what kind of endgame can Ukraine and the international community accept? For this, I believe there are a few sine qua non conditions. First, there is no peace without fully guaranteeing and restoring Ukraine's full independence, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. We should work together in order to give Ukraine assurances that the long-lasting peace will not be broken by another Russian aggression. This is why Romania has joined the G7 declaration of support for Ukraine. Second, Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova must continue to receive full assistance for their European Union integration. We know from our own experience that the European Union integration is a truly transformative process, fostering democratization, economic development, stability, and security. A swift decision on opening accession negotiations with both countries is a must. Third, there can be no peace without justice. The aggressor must pay the price for its aggression based on international law. All those who committed horrible crimes in Ukraine and against Ukraine must be brought to justice. All like-minded countries agree that we need to continue to support Ukraine in its fight against Russia. However, the way out of the war and into the peace will be a new test for the international community. There are international actors already closely monitoring our unity and determination. Simply put, we cannot afford to be weak, divided, and incoherent in our response. We must defend the rules-based international order and our community of values and security. We must defend democracy and reject tyranny. We must defend diplomacy and dialogue and reject the use of force in international relations. Thank you. Looking forward to our debate.
So much, please. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Cooley. I have the privilege of being your moderator today. The format is as follows. We will engage in a bit of discussion touching upon some of the points the President brought up in his opening remarks, and then we will move into a Q&A portion where you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the microphones. So let's go right at it, President Iohannis. So this is UNGA week, and certainly what we've seen in Ukraine is a very unified response by the West. There are 70 countries, however, that have abstained from condemnations of Russia and have notably made comments like President Lula of Brazil that Zelensky is equally to blame for the war, countries that have openly hedged, as India has done, countries that seem to be supporting Russia's political rhetoric, like China, and then certain countries that just don't support the sanctions regime. They see nothing but pain and sacrifice. They see escalating energy and food prices, and they see a selectivity by the West. Why this condemnation of the Ukraine war and not Iraq, not Afghanistan? Why welcoming Ukrainian refugees and not others? I'm curious, how do you engage with such comments, especially in a global forum like this, where questions about international order are central to this whole question of how to resolve Ukraine?
Well, we have to see the bigger picture. This is not a game, this is a war. It's about power, about resilience, about freedom, survival, sovereignty. Russia is the aggressor, and Ukraine fights for its freedom, for its sovereignty, for its territorial integrity. Ukrainians are incredibly brave, and they're fighting for their country. The European Union, the United States, and many others decided that Ukraine deserves and needs international help. But on the other side, there is somebody, there's Russia. So we have basically two narratives. Our narrative, which we believe is the correct one, it's based on international rule, on international law, it's based on the values of democracy. But on the other side, there is also a narrative. Russia tries to communicate to the international community that it is right. So we have two narratives, ours and the Russian narrative. Unfortunately, I have to say unfortunately, not everybody has been convinced by our narrative. A number of people and states, we have to admit this, are rather on the side of Russia for different reasons. Some depend on Russia. Some would like to benefit from whatever, Russian products. Others would like to benefit from Russian protection. Some people probably get Russian money. And so we have this Russian narrative which spreads wider than we expected it. When this war started, we cannot fight a narrative. We can only try to convince people that we are the good guys and the other side are the bad guys. So I'm trying to convince other leaders that we are fighting with Ukraine, we are helping Ukraine, and our side is the right side. Every time when I visit a country or a leader, we discuss this. It's issue number one. No matter where you go, it's issue number one. And, well, sometimes we are successful, and sometimes we have to try a second time or a third time. And as you mentioned, the Brazilian president, I discussed this with him. I have been touring in South America. We sat together maybe for 3 hours, and, well, it was a good discussion. At the end, his narrative sounded a bit different, but fact is that a lot of heads of state and government fear that this war will drag them into recession too, that this war will affect them, will affect their nation, will affect them politically. So it's a very complicated communication, and we know very well that wars are won not only with weapons, but also with communication. And so we better work hard on our communication and explain to people why we stand up for Ukraine, why we describe the situation as it is, why we blame Russia, why we wish to have people brought to justice, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. So, just to follow up on what's happening now in your country, Romania, Romanian authorities on multiple occasions have confirmed the discovery of drone fragments on your soil amid sustained attacks by Russian forces on Ukraine's ports and targets. You were quoted as saying that this is an absolutely unacceptable violation of the sovereign airspace of Romania, a NATO ally, with the real risk to the security of Romanian citizens in the area. Yep. Your prime minister said, though, no one attacked us and no one is attacking us. So what are the red lines here regarding the potential of spillover of the conflict, of these drone flights and other Russian activities spilling over onto your territory and NATO territory?
We had 3 situations when we discovered whatever leftovers of drones on Romanian territory. Luckily, so far, nobody has been hurt and no real damage occurred. But doesn't mean that it didn't matter. It matters. And we have to see it a bit, again, with the background. Why does Russia attack these small ports on the Danube? Because they're small ports. They're not of a huge importance worldwide. By the way, we have a Danube border with Ukraine, which is quite long, and Ukraine has some harbors on the Danube. We have some harbors. Basically, they're on opposite sides of the Danube. So why does Russia attack these small ports? Well, the explanation, in my opinion, is that Russia wants to impair the transit of Ukrainian grains. We in Romania allowed Ukraine from day one to transit Romania tax-free, use all our logistical lines to export grains to whoever, mainly to, less developed countries in the so-called global south. And they're exporting quite a lot. My colleagues calculated since the war started, since last February, through the Romanian logistical lines, Ukraine exported more than 25 million tons of agricultural products, mostly grains. These go on road, they go on rail, and they go on the Danube. And much of it is brought to the Danube through these small ports. So Russia is attacking these small ports to scare people off, to stop the transit of Ukrainian grains. They attack with drones, and sometimes these drones, after they're probably shot down, they land on Romanian soil. This is unacceptable. However, these attacks are war crimes because they do not attack any military facility. They attack civilian facilities. They attack civilian infrastructure. They attack simple people who work in these harbors. And we have to see it as such. So it's unacceptable right from the start. But having a spillover to Romanian areas is fully unacceptable, and we are protesting pretty loud against this. We discussed this with our allies. We already enhanced our anti-air defense in the area, and so we do whatever has to be done to protect our people, but still it remains unacceptable, despite the fact that, of course, Russia is not intentionally attacking Romania. These drones are not directed at Romania, but as they land in Romania, this is a real problem and it has to be addressed.
Okay. Let me invite you to line up in front of the microphones for the Q&A session. And feel free to state your name, though you are not required to, but please do tell us your institutional affiliation here at Columbia. And in order to include as many people as possible, please keep your question relatively concise. So let's start here. Yep.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for visiting us today. My name is Anthony. I'm with Columbia's School of Public and International Affairs. My question is about the Bucharest 9 grouping, the Formatul București, which you started with President Duda in 2015. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, why did you decide to start this initiative? Second, now that the bloc is very impactful in the EU, taking the lead on the Ukraine policy, for example, how do you see it evolving in the coming years? And do you see a tension between the B9 group and the broader EU in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the last part. Not only there is no tension with the rest of the group, there's a synergy. We work very well together, and the format is praised as a format which brings real solutions. Why we created it? Well, when the Polish President Andrzej Duda and myself discussed on one occasion preparing for the NATO summit, which then took place in Poland, in Warsaw, we thought that it might be of importance for the former East Bloc states to have discussions before that, because we have specific issues. We have, for instance, the issue of the eastern flank. It's us on the eastern flank. And when we started these discussions back in 2015, the term eastern flank existed, but defense and deterrence was okay, but not super strong. And we thought this has to change, and we changed it because we convinced the other allies that defense and mostly deterrence has to be way stronger, because Russia understands only one language: power. They don't care about the rest. They just use it. So we did this. It evolved very well, and we managed something else. In the NATO documents, the Black Sea was mentioned as a matter of fact. And guess what? This war and the war against Georgia happened in the Black Sea region, nowhere else. So there has to be a strong focus on the Black Sea region. We discussed this first in B9 and then with the other allies, and now we see the result. Not the war, that's the Russian result. We see our result. Black Sea area is considered of strategic importance for the Euro-Atlantic security. We have contingency plans, we have defense, we have deterrence. So it's a format which proved its value and is fully accepted by all the allies.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's go over here for the next question, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Parizada. I'm from Uzbekistan, and I'm a freshman in CC. So my question was about post-Soviet countries, in particular Central Asian countries. Do you think their position, like being neutral towards the war, is correct? And do you think they might be under threat of Russian power in the future?
Thank you. And if I may add, we saw you with President Tokayev, I believe. You had some discussions with him. Did this issue come up with him?
This issue always comes up. So let's see again why Russia is going on war. Why do they attack? There was a time when we had two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union had a large sphere of influence, and all the Central Asian states you mentioned have been part of the Soviet Union. The Russian president, Putin, is trying to restore the influence, power, maybe even the state unity of the Soviet Union. So I guess not everybody in the Central Asian republics is very comfortable, because Ukraine used to be a significant part of the Soviet Union, and Georgia used to be a significant part of the Soviet Union. Well, what happened? Georgia and Ukraine wanted to break free from the Russian influence. They wanted to become members of NATO, and they still wish to become members of the European Union. Russia did not like this and did what Russia does, attack. So in 2008, there was a NATO summit in Bucharest, my country. And at that summit, leaders took a decision and said that Ukraine and Georgia will become NATO members. There have been no conditions attached. And not before long, Russia attacked Georgia. And when Ukraine really showed that it wants to break free and become a member of the European Union and of NATO, Russia attacked Ukraine. Now guess what Central Asian leaders fear? If they're not very neutral, who knows? So President Zelensky and the Ukrainians are right when they say we're not fighting only our war. We are fighting for democratic values. We're fighting for you too, and for you too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question, please.
Thank you very much. Hi, Mr. President. It's truly an honor to have you here. My name is Ivan from the engineering school, and I would like to ask you a question following up a little bit on our question from the moderator about comments from non-Western countries, wondering about the NATO's and the United States concern with the Ukrainian war, and why, for example, the European Union is accepting refugees from Ukraine, but, for example, not so from other countries in war like Iraq or many others. Thank you.
The migration issue is very complicated, and not accepting, well, my opinion, we have millions of immigrants, and we all try to integrate them, but with Ukrainians it's quite different, because they are fleeing from an active war near us. And we are the only chance they see. So the European Union decided to give them a special status. We in Romania accepted till today over 6 million Ukrainians who crossed our borders. Not everybody stayed in Romania. Some stay for a couple of days, others stay for longer and then leave. However, those who decided to stay are welcome. We open jobs for them. Their children can go to school, to kindergarten, even to university. And we find housing for them. Fact is that the Romanians have been sensationally welcoming. Right from day one, simple people opened their houses for the Ukrainians. The state authorities moved surprisingly fast to open whatever had to be opened. NGOs have been helping from day one. So this is one way we see we have to and we can help Ukraine in these difficult times. But doesn't mean that others are kept out for no reason. It's a question which has not been sorted out 100%. Of those who come, how many are fleeing from war or persecution of any kind, and how many are economic migrants? Because, yes, the European Union is quite big and rich, but it's not possible to accommodate everybody who wishes to come. And so we are working on improving our immigration systems, sometimes with more and sometimes not so much success, as you probably have seen recently, this huge inflow of migrants to a tiny Italian island, near Malta, more precisely, and trying to enter Italy and from there the Union. It's a very difficult question, and unfortunately we have some answers, and some are still missing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question over here, please.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Edward Lopez. I'm from the Columbia School of Journalism. And the question I had is, what do you think of the current news coverage, particularly in Western media, of the current Ukrainian war? And are there any parallels or differences between that of the current war and the invasion of 2008 in Georgia?
It's a horrible war. You can describe that in many ways. It remains a horrible war. And in the end, those who are at war have to find a way towards peace. Sometimes people say, why do we have to witness all this cruelty and all this injustice? Well, we have to witness it, because otherwise we believe talking about it makes it go away. It doesn't.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Hello. My name is Ron from the School of General Studies. My question was about the issue of Moldova, which has for a long time shown its interest to join Romania and vice versa. And considering that it's not a NATO or European Union country yet, and has its own breakaway province that Russia supports in Transnistria, how has a recent war changed the urgency and the discussion about integrating Moldova into this framework?
Yes, thank you for that.
Moldova is very important for us for historic reasons, for language reasons, for cultural reasons, and because we care for them as they are our neighbors and in need. Fact is that we and allies and partners, the United States, many of the European Union, are together with us trying to improve the situation in Moldova. Moldova has the highest number of refugees per capita of all European countries. They have a weak economy. They have a huge problem which is called Transnistria, because right from the start, when they broke free from the Soviet Empire, they tried to escape Russian influence, but Russia did not like that and brought troops to Transnistria, so it's very complicated. Still, we are working together and we are improving connections, infrastructure. We help them to build strong institutions. We help them to improve their economic situation, and we help them to prepare to become members of the European Union.
Great. Yes, please.
Hi, Mr. President. My name is Yuri from School of International Public Affairs. Since Romania shares the border with Ukraine, so I was wondering if something negative is going to happen on the border, then how do you think people's attitude towards this conflict is going to change, and how Romania is going to balance the your firm's approach to Ukraine with its internal and domestic security? Thank you.
It's a very complicated issue you touched upon, because if we go deeper into it, it's something called war fatigue. And it shows in Europe. More and more people ask, well, why do we have to support Ukraine? Because it impacts our economy. It impacts our well-being, and who knows, maybe it impacts our security. Well, guess what? We, the leaders, are responsible to explain why we support Ukraine, why it is vital for us to support Ukraine. And you know what? Most people understand it. It's just some extremist parties who try to change the attitude. There's talk that even some of these parties are under Russian influence. And so Russia obviously tries to spread its narrative through whatever hybrid actions is it called. And yes, people are scared. For instance, the area you mentioned, where drones fell on Romanian territory. Well, guess what? People are scared. I mean, really scared. If you live in a village and a mile near your village, a Russian drone comes down and explodes, of course you ask yourself, well, maybe the next one falls on my house. So this is one issue, and we are doing whatever we can to protect our people. But despite the fear, they understand very well why we have to support Ukraine, because they see the bombing on the other side of the Danube. And if we just sit and do nothing, who knows, maybe it comes to us too. So we'd better do something.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Over here, please.
Hi, my name is Adina Kazaku. I am a student at Columbia College. And Mr. President, you focused on diplomatic relations and how other actors have strengthened Romania's security. Yet there exist internal infrastructural threats to national security, despite your aims to make progress on these issues. So, for example, a higher education system that does not make global rankings, hospitals that have recently failed to administer effective prenatal care, and politicians that claim academic titles based on plagiarized theses. How do you see these issues in relation to Romania's national security and, more generally, security in the Black Sea? And what actions do you plan to take in the last stretch of your presidency to address these issues?
Well, if there's one country where all politicians are honest, There's no corruption. All the hospitals function 100% and so on. Please tell me which one. But of course, there's a different degree. You're right. The most well-ranking universities are in the United States of America. But there's a competitor coming up. Who knows? Fact is that Romania evolved very much over the last years. But that doesn't mean that in 30 years we managed to overcome all the systemic failures and issues we inherited from the other regime. I myself know both regimes. Half of my life I spent in communist Romania and the other half in democratic Romania, and to everybody's surprise, even to my own, I became president of this Romania. And we are working hard on it, but we still have a lot to do. But our security is better than it ever was. Being a strong NATO ally is something which I would define in the following way. When Romania became a NATO member, it was back in 2004, we have been a country which needed protection from others. Our economy was not so strong, the systemic problems had not been sorted out, the economy was so-and-so. Now as we speak, Romania is a provider of regional security, and our own security is well taken care of. But the other problems, some of the other problems still has to be sorted out.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Adrian Esteban Gonzalez. I am a student at Columbia College studying Caribbean Latino Studies, Economics, and Computer Science. So this morning, Republican Majority Taylor Greene tweeted, "Americans are suffering in Lahaina, East Palestine, and now Eagle Pass has issued an emergency declaration because thousands of migrants from all over the world invaded their border town. We are 33 trillion in debt. The only thing US leaders should be talking with Zelensky about is a permanent ceasefire and ending the war, not writing him a check to continue grinding Ukraine to a bloody stump." So my question would be, we mentioned how important it is to continue to provide aid at the border for the security of Romania and us, the East. What would you recommend to Majority Taylor Greene or the Biden administration to do? Would it be to send American troops to the border, continue economic funding, or a ceasefire from Russia?
Well, even if I had some ideas, I would not tell them, because this is not diplomatic use. As president of a country, it's not my thing to tell other leaders what to do. This not telling is something called sovereignty. Each nation has its own way to deal with domestic and foreign issues, and we'd better not mix things up. But on the other hand, I know there are a lot of people worldwide. I'm not speaking about specific members or communities who say, well, why don't they just stop? And then we'll see. Well, guess what? My opinion, and this I can tell because it's my opinion, the only ones who can have a say how they will accept peace for their country are the Ukrainians. So I would refrain from telling them what to do, because they are dying for their freedom, not us. We can have opinions, and in the best scenario, we can help them, but we should not try to be smarter than those who die for their country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, Mr. President. My name is Tore Kohl. I'm from the Columbia Law School. My question is in relation to the situation in the Black Sea and kind of grain shipments. Just this morning, we got news that I think the first grain freighter arrived in Istanbul, Turkey, traveling through Romanian waters in the Black Sea after Russia's blockade. At the same time, we have Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia still upholding an import ban on Ukrainian agricultural products, even after the EU just recently lifted the ban. And a few days ago, Ukraine launched a complaint with the World Trade Organization. And yesterday, we got a statement, I think, from the
I'm sorry, if you could just ask the question part. We're almost out of time.
So like what I want to get to is that the situation between Ukraine and Poland is currently pretty tense. Poland has, made a comment that it might stop weapons deliveries to Ukraine. So my question to you is like, where does Romania see itself in perhaps mediating kind of the current tense situation between Poland and Ukraine and keeping together the united front in Europe?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Well, my hope is that they will find a new modus vivendi without tensions, but that's more their problem than mine. My problem is the grain transit, and I can tell you simply, I sorted it out. Yesterday, we had a very good meeting, President Zelensky, President von der Leyen, the Bulgarian Vice Prime Minister, and myself, and we sorted it out. That's it. That's how I believe we have to tackle issues, because if you introduce conditionalities on the help for Ukraine because of domestic political issues, usually they're called elections, it's not a good way. And yes, we opened our national waters in the Black Sea for Ukrainian ships, and now they're not going straight through the Black Sea, they're coming through our waters. That's fine. So we're adding a new dimension. Till now we had road, rail, Danube, now we have Black Sea too. And if it's necessary, we will even improve that. Now as we speak, our logistical capacity for Ukrainian products, mostly grain, is 2 and 2.5, let's say, optimistically, million tons per month. Our ambition is by the end of this year to reach 4 million tons per month. That's it. That's how we treat it.
Thank you.
Great. So I am afraid we are at time. President Iohannis, thank you so much for joining us for the World Leaders Forum. On behalf of President Shafiq, the entire Columbia community, we hope you will come again. Thank you.
Much.